My name is Lauren, and 4 years ago, I walked into what I believed was the perfect life. At 27, I married Daniel, a man who vowed to cherish me long before we even reached the altar. In those early days, I truly felt like the luckiest woman alive. Daniel wasn't just my husband, he was my closest friend, my confidant. We shared everything: morning coffee rituals, late-night conversations about the future, and the unspoken understanding that we were building something beautiful together. He had a way of making me feel special, in ways both grand and subtle. On our first anniversary, he orchestrated the most thoughtful surprise, recreating our very first date down to the last detail. We sat at the same cozy table in the intimate Italian restaurant where we first realized we were meant to be. But it wasn't just the elaborate gestures that made me feel loved, it was the everyday moments. The way he'd tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear, the soft kisses he'd place on my forehead when he thought I was asleep. Our life together was filled with warmth, laughter, and an undeniable sense of harmony. We lived in a spacious, sunlit house, a home that we envisioned one day filling with the sounds of children's laughter. My career as a fitness trainer at a well-known gym brought me a deep sense of satisfaction, and Daniel was flourishing professionally. Financially stable and emotionally secure, we often talked about expanding our family, imagining the joy of little feet running through the house. A significant part of our life was Eleanor, Daniel's mother, whose presence was both strong and affectionate. From the very first moment we met, she showered me with praise. "Lauren, you're absolutely stunning, like a Hollywood actress from the 1950s, she'd say, her eyes twinkling with admiration. She often spoke about how beautiful our future children would be, blending my looks with Daniel's undeniable charm. Her approval meant everything to me. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. That evening, I was driving home from the gym, my mind filled with plans for the upcoming weekend. Daniel and I had arranged a short getaway, just the two of us, a chance to reconnect and have serious conversations about the family we were eager to start. As I neared an intersection, a familiar song we both loved began playing on the radio. Smiling, I turned up the volume, lost in the nostalgia of the moment. And then, disaster struck. A car out of nowhere ran a red light and barreled straight into my side. The impact was catastrophic, a deafening explosion of twisting metal and shattering glass. My head snapped violently, and pain seared through my body. The world around me became a chaotic blur, flashing lights, indistinct voices, a spiraling loss of control. And then, as swiftly as it had all begun, everything dissolved into silence and darkness. When I finally regained consciousness, it felt like waking up in a world I no longer recognized. My body was a patchwork of pain, wrapped in layers of bandages. The first few days were a haze of doctors, medication, and fleeting moments of awareness. Daniel was always there, at first. His face was lined with worry, his fingers wrapped around mine as he whispered, "Hey, how are you feeling?" I attempted a weak smile, though it hurt to move. Like I got hit by a truck, I joked feebly. He returned the smile, but it was strained, fleeting. The nurses were gentle, always offering comforting words, but their eyes betrayed something else: pity. I knew I was badly injured, but what lay beneath the bandages remained a mystery. As the days passed, something shifted. Daniel's visits became shorter, his reasons for leaving more frequent. "Work is crazy right now," he'd say, or "Mom needs my help with something." I tried to be understanding, but the solitude of the hospital room was suffocating. Then came the moment I had been dreading: the removal of the bandages. Sitting before a mirror, my heart pounded. Susan, a kind nurse, offered a reassuring smile. "Are you ready?" she asked. I nodded, swallowing my fear. With slow, deliberate movements, she unwrapped the layers, revealing my reflection one fragment at a time. The face that stared back at me was unfamiliar. Scarred. Altered. A ghost of the woman I once was. Tears welled in my eyes. Susan placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It's still early." "Healing takes time," she said softly. Her words barely registered. My mind was consumed by a single, paralyzing fear: what would Daniel think? Would he still see me as the woman he married? And then came the moment I dreaded the most, Daniel's next visit. He entered the room, but the confidence that usually marked his stride faltered the moment his eyes met mine. His voice barely rose above a whisper as he greeted me, "Hey." I turned away, unable to hold his gaze. My voice trembled as I asked, "It's bad, isn't it?" Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. It's not that bad. "You're still you," he finally said. But the hesitation in his voice, the way he struggled to meet my eyes, spoke louder than any words ever could. I lay still, feeling an invisible but growing distance between us. The man who once vowed to stand by me no matter what now seemed uncertain, lost, unsure of how to navigate the chasm that had formed between us, one that my scars had carved into our lives. Then, as he stepped out of the hospital room, I overheard him on the phone. His words, meant to be private, sliced through me like a blade. "I don't know, Mom. She became ugly. It's hard to look at her." There was something in his tone, disgust, perhaps? I stared at the ceiling, tears slipping silently down my face. It wasn't just his words that shattered me, it was the undeniable truth they revealed. His love had conditions, ones I could no longer meet. I mourned, not just for the beauty I had lost, but for the love I had believed was unconditional. For the future I had envisioned, now feeling further away than ever. Going home was supposed to be a comfort, a step back into normalcy. But as I crossed the threshold of the house that once held warmth and safety, a sickness stirred within me. The walls, once familiar, now felt oppressive. The air, once filled with love, now carried something colder, resentment, unease, hidden disdain. Daniel barely spoke those first few days. He moved around the house carefully, as if afraid to disturb something fragile. Our conversations, once so easy, now felt stilted, weighed down by things unsaid. I tried to reach out, to close the distance between us, but it was like speaking to someone who had already left. One evening, as I sat curled on the couch with a book in my hands, Daniel walked into the room. He glanced at me for a split second before quickly looking away. "How was your day?" I asked, hoping to carve out some semblance of normalcy. He shrugged, eyes fixed on the television. "It was okay. Busy." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I was thinking, maybe we could go out this weekend. Just for some fresh air." Daniel hesitated, then muttered, "I don't think it's a good idea. Maybe you should rest more." His words landed like a slap. This wasn't about rest. He didn't want to be seen with me. I turned back to my book, but the words blurred as tears welled in my eyes. And it wasn't just him, Eleanor's visits were just as unbearable. She would sit across from me, her face carefully arranged into polite neutrality, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted around the room, never quite settling on me. One day, she finally spoke. "It's such a shame, what happened." There was something unpleasant in her voice, something close to revulsion. I clenched my fists beneath the table, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Yes, it is." Eleanor sighed, her fingers tapping restlessly against the wood. "But life goes on, right? We all have to move forward." The words were meant to comfort, but they felt more like a dismissal, an attempt to sidestep an uncomfortable truth. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then came the night that broke me. I woke to the sound of Daniel's voice. Slurred, unsteady. I moved closer to the door, heart pounding. "I can't do this anymore, Mom. She's a different person. A monster. I don't even recognize her." The alcohol in his voice didn't dull the sharpness of his words. I stood there, frozen, each syllable carving itself into my mind. I was the same person, wasn't I? But to him, I was something else now. A stranger. An obligation. A burden. I slipped back into bed, but sleep never came. The room felt suffocating, the darkness pressing in on me, mirroring the emptiness settling deep in my chest. And as I lay there, I realized the painful truth: the home I had cherished was gone. The love it once held had withered, leaving only a house. A place where I lived, but no longer belonged. The change had crept in slowly, like fog rolling over the landscape, smothering everything in its path. Daniel began staying out later, the sharp scent of alcohol clinging to him when he finally stumbled through the door. The warmth in his eyes had vanished, replaced by something harder, something that cut into me more than any words ever could. One night, he came home unsteady, his steps uneven as he crossed the room. I sat up, concern tightening in my chest. "Daniel, you're home late. Is everything okay?" He sneered, his words thick with alcohol. "Oh, now you care? You spend all day hiding in this house, and suddenly you care about me?" I flinched at the sharpness in his tone. "Daniel, you're drunk. Let's talk about this in the morning." A bitter laugh escaped his lips, sending a shiver down my spine. "What's there to talk about? Just look at you. Look at us." I felt my throat tighten. Without another word, I turned and retreated to our bedroom, hot tears stinging my eyes. The next morning, still shaken, I called Eleanor, hoping she would offer some understanding, some support. My voice wavered as I confessed, "He's drinking too much. He comes home late, and he's cruel." Eleanor's response was quick, dismissive. "It's normal, dear. Men do these things. He's just stressed." Her words were like ice water washing over me. That was the moment I understood I was alone in this. My pain, my struggles, they were mine to carry, and no one would lighten the weight. Then came the night that shattered everything. I woke to bright flashes of light. Disoriented, I blinked the sleep from my eyes and saw Daniel standing over me, his phone in hand, snapping pictures. Fear gripped me. "What are you doing?" My voice was unsteady, confusion and dread swirling together. He smirked, his drunkenness evident in his swaying stance. "I'm sending your photos to Hollywood. Maybe you can be in horror movies now, no makeup needed." His words struck like a blade, slicing through the last remnants of hope I had for us. I lay frozen, unable to move as he continued pressing the shutter, each click deepening my humiliation. The weight of his cruelty bore down on me. When he finally left the room, I buried my face in the pillow, sobs racking my body. I cried for the man I once loved, for the tenderness that had turned to malice, for the life that now felt irretrievably lost. Desperate to shield myself from his disdain, I began wearing a mask at home. A simple, white mask, something to hide the scars that had become the focus of everyone's stares, judgments, and whispered comments. It was a small barrier, a feeble attempt to reclaim some sense of control in a world that had grown so cold. One morning, as I adjusted the mask, staring at the blank, featureless face in the mirror, my phone rang. The unfamiliar number made me hesitate, but I answered. "Hello, is this Mrs. Carver?" The voice on the other end was careful, unfamiliar, yet sincere. "Yes, this is she. Who is this?" I asked, curiosity flickering through the numbness. "My name is Robert," the man said, his tone heavy with regret. I was the father of the young man in your accident." A wave of emotions crashed over me, shock, grief, confusion. My throat tightened. "I see," I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause before he continued. "I can't tell you how sorry I am for what happened. My son was troubled, and what he did, it was unforgivable." His words hung between us, filled with sorrow and sincerity. "I want to help, to make amends," he continued. I swallowed, unsure how to process the unexpected offer. "How?" I asked, wary yet unable to ignore the faint glimmer of hope his words ignited. "I'd like to meet and discuss it in person, if that's all right with you." There was a quiet plea in his voice. I hesitated, my mind a whirlwind of uncertainty. But finally, I agreed. Sitting across from Robert in a quiet cafe, I studied the man before me. His eyes, filled with remorse, never wavered as he spoke. "Lauren, I want to help financially, surgeries, treatments, anything that might help you heal." His voice was steady but brimming with emotion. The offer was overwhelming, unexpected, and tempting. I need some time to think," I replied, my mind spinning with possibilities. I told no one about our meeting. Not Daniel, not Eleanor. Their reactions would only add to my uncertainty, their voices drowning out my own. For days, I wrestled with the decision. But in the end, I accepted Robert's offer. I scheduled consultations with plastic surgeons, exploring what could be done. To Daniel, I mentioned only that I had medical appointments. He didn't ask for details, and I didn't offer any. His indifference spoke volumes. On the day of the surgery, as I lay on the operating table, the mask was finally removed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I faced my reflection, my scars, my pain, my reality, without a barrier. Closing my eyes, I allowed myself to dream, to hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, the woman staring back at me one day would be someone I recognized. Someone whole. Weeks stretched into months following the surgery, and with each passing day, my face slowly healed, gradually restoring the features I once knew. Yet, I chose to keep this transformation hidden, concealing it beneath the mask that had become both my shield and my secret. Daniel remained oblivious, too consumed by his own detachment to notice any change. The day of my final follow-up appointment arrived, and as I stepped back into the house, mask still in place, I braced myself for the hostility that had long since taken root within its walls. Daniel and Eleanor were waiting, their gazes dripping with silent contempt. The atmosphere was thick, suffocating, a reminder that this was no longer a home, merely a place where resentment festered. Daniel's eyes flicked to mine before he quickly looked away, his lips twisting in disgust. "Look at you, still hiding behind that mask. Can't even face the world," he muttered. I held my silence, letting the mask serve as my answer. Without warning, he shoved a thick stack of papers in my direction. They slipped from his grasp, scattering across the floor. I glanced down, already knowing what they were before my eyes confirmed it. Divorce papers. A tangible, final severance of a bond that had already disintegrated. "I'm done with this farce," he spat. "Sign them and let's end this." A quiet calm settled over me, not of defeat, but of clarity. I bent down, retrieved the papers, and without hesitation, signed my name. My pen moved smoothly across the page, my resolve unwavering. Eleanor scoffed from her perch nearby. "Good riddance," she sneered. "We don't need an ugly reminder of failure in our lives." The words, once capable of cutting me deep, barely grazed me now. I had long since moved beyond their reach. A small smile ghosted my lips as I lifted my hands to my face and slowly removed the mask. The air felt cool against my skin, my uncovered face a statement in itself. Daniel's breath hitched, his eyes widening in pure disbelief. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, looking like a man struggling to comprehend what was right before him. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth, the usual arrogance in her expression crumbling. But how?" Daniel stammered, taking a hesitant step forward. I met his gaze, my smile deepening. "You were too lost in your own misery to see me, to see the woman you once vowed to love in sickness and in health." The confidence drained from his face. His bravado, his indifference, all of it melted into something desperate. "Please, let's start over," he pleaded. "We can forget all of this ever happened." I laughed softly, not out of amusement, but at the sheer absurdity of his words. "Forget?" I echoed. "No, Daniel. I won't forget how you treated me, how you made me feel." I straightened, gathering my bag and the signed papers. "I'm leaving. But not because you or your mother want me gone. I'm leaving for me." With that, I stepped past them, through the door that once symbolized love, but had long since turned into a prison. Their shocked faces were the last thing I took with me, a reminder of how far I had come and of the life that was now mine to reclaim. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I moved into a modest apartment, a space that was entirely my own. It was quiet, still cluttered with unpacked boxes and empty walls, but it was a place where I could breathe, where I could begin again. Returning to work at the fitness center was another step forward. The familiar scent of sweat and iron, the rhythmic clinking of weights, it was comforting, a piece of my old life that still felt like home. The moment I stepped inside, Susan, one of the trainers, greeted me with a warm smile. "Lauren, you're back. We missed you around here." I smiled, the warmth of belonging washing over me. "It's good to be back. I've missed this place." With every training session, I felt myself regaining not just my strength, but my sense of self. I had once feared I would never find my way back to the woman I used to be, but each day, with every class I led, I was proving to myself that she had never truly been lost. Then, one afternoon, after an exhausting session, I sank onto a bench to catch my breath. That's when I saw him. Robert. I hadn't seen him since our meeting at the cafe months ago, yet there he was, standing at the entrance, his expression hesitant but warm. "Hello," he greeted, offering a small smile. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. How have you been?" I stood, momentarily surprised, then nodded. "I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to see you, Robert." We fell into easy conversation, speaking of trivial things at first, the weather, the gym, the simple updates of daily life. But as the moments passed, our words drifted into something deeper. "I never got the chance to thank you properly," I admitted, my voice sincere. "Your help, it changed everything for me." Robert's smile softened. "I'm just glad I could do something to make amends. You've come a long way." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that I had. He hesitated briefly, then spoke again. "I was wondering if maybe you'd like to grab a coffee sometime? No pressure, just as friends." His invitation caught me off guard, but in the best way possible. It was unexpected, yet it felt right. A genuine smile spread across my face. "I'd like that." As Robert walked out of the gym, I watched him go, a flutter of excitement stirring in my chest, a feeling I hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime. This was something new, something untouched by past pain, a chance to rediscover life from a fresh perspective. That night, lying in bed in my new apartment, I let my thoughts drift over the twists and turns my life had taken. There was still pain, still healing to be done, but hope had taken root. Hope for a future that belonged solely to me, shaped by my choices, my desires. The dawn of a new day was breaking, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace it. Life, I've come to realize, never follows a straight path. It winds and bends, bringing challenges and unexpected detours. Since my divorce, I had been rediscovering myself, but the journey wasn't without its obstacles. Daniel, unable or unwilling to accept the finality of our separation, began reaching out. His persistence, a stark contrast to the indifference he once showed, disrupted the peace I had fought so hard to reclaim. His messages, his attempts to pull me back into a past I had already left behind, forced me to make a difficult but necessary decision. The day I stood in court, filing for a restraining order, a wave of mixed emotions crashed over me. There was sadness, mourning the remnants of a love that had once meant everything to me. But there was also unwavering resolve. I would not allow my newfound independence to be tainted by his desperation. Through it all, Robert remained a steady presence in my life. What had begun as a tentative friendship had grown into something beautiful, something profound. He never tried to fix me, he simply stood by my side, offering quiet support and understanding. One evening, as we walked along the riverbank beneath a sky littered with stars, he turned to me, his expression soft yet sincere. "You know, you are always beautiful, even with your scars." His voice was gentle but firm, as if speaking a truth he had long known. Not everyone can look past the surface. Not everyone sees into the soul. His words reached deep into me, touching a part of myself that still carried the echoes of past pain. I met his gaze, my heart swelling. "Thank you, Robert. That means more to me than you can imagine." He smiled, the starlight reflecting in his eyes. "It's the truth. And I'm grateful for every part of you." That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on everything that had led me to this moment. The journey had been fraught with pain, heartbreak, and loss, but it had also led me to something greater. I realized then that the most profound kind of love isn't about appearances or perfection. It isn't about what we have or what the world sees. It's about being loved for our essence, for the person we truly are. Robert had seen me, all of me, and embraced what he saw. Life had come full circle, but in a way I had never expected. I had lost a life I once believed to be perfect, only to find something infinitely more meaningful. I had learned to love myself again, and in doing so, I had found someone who loved me not in spite of my scars, but because they were part of my story. As sleep gently pulled me under, a quiet gratitude settled over me. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength I had gained, and for the love that had found its way into my life. I had stepped out of the shadows of my past into a future that was bright, boundless, and entirely my own.